Welcome to Mindfall, where the questions twist and turn. Dive deep with us, we'll watch ideas burn. Down the rabbit hole we go, chasing thoughts you've yet to know. Mindfall's here, let's start the show.
Hi, and welcome to Mindfall with Mike and Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Mike. In this podcast, we explore the ideas that take us down the proverbial rabbit hole. We'll ask and answer the hard questions with the help of an AI search engine.
This is going to be our first podcast, and today's episode, we want to talk about how much money is enough money.
Ooh, that's a good one. And this is how it works. I'll type our question into an AI search engine, we'll discuss the responses, and then from there we can ask further questions, contemplate the concepts, and dive deeper than we think any other podcast ever has. You ready to go, Mike?
Sure, let's go.
All right. We're going to hop on over to our AI search engine for the day. We're going to use ChatGPT 5. We're going to ask it how much money is enough money. Here we go. Oh, it's thinking hard
right now.
It is thinking hard. All right. Let's see how it breaks it all down. It really wants us to expand on that enough. You know, there are three layers. Is it survival enough? Is it comfort enough? And is it purpose enough?
I think what we have to keep in mind, too, is we're going to base this on the United States, obviously, because, I mean, if we took this out to some other country outside the United States, where their economy is not the same as ours, these numbers don't actually correlate to what's happening here.
And we're recording this in 2025, when we're not sure what money is going to be like next week. Inflation's been nuts.
So, not at all.
Survival enough is the amount required to cover basic needs like housing, food, and transportation. And in the U.S. today, that means about $75,000 to $100,000 a year for a single person, or $150,000 to $200,000 for a family of four, depending on the cost of living.
Let me stop you right there, Mike. I find that figure to be quite interesting because, you know, right now, you know, I'm going to talk about in some of the Northeast states, the minimum wage is about $15 an hour.
Yeah.
But that does not hold true for the whole rest of the United States, where I hear in some places it's either still $7 or $8. Well, you know, if the average work year is 2,000 hours and you're making $8 an hour, I mean, that's like, you know, $16,000 or something like that. You're not making a whole lot of money.
No, I mean, realistically, if you're not making it beyond the poverty level if you're making minimum wage. And so, are you surviving, and how are you surviving?
I mean, multiple jobs, I guess, and then, you know, with the cost of electricity right now, food right now, healthcare right now, I don't know how, I mean, the numbers that they're showing, I feel like are a little bit more real of what you need to survive, but how is a basic person doing it?
Yeah, and I think survival enough is covering everything, is making sure that your family of four really has what they need to not struggle day to day. You know, if you're making less than this, and I know plenty of people who are, you're making concessions day to day. You're really trying to figure out where your trade-offs are and what you're going without. And you know, we tend to think that having streaming services and just be able to get online and go to Walmart.com and order what you need and have it delivered to the house, that's normal. Where some of that stuff is a lot more constrained when you're living at this survival level. And right. I think it, like you said, it really speaks volumes to where we are in today's society, that if you're only making poverty level income, you know, in that $16,000 to $50,000 a year, you are struggling. Yeah, I mean, and that's on a single income, and if you got both people earning that, you're still below this quote unquote survival level where you're really fighting to figure out what you're going to live without, and how you're making the ends meet, and that's really scary. Without the fear of missing bills.
Missing
Yeah,
meals is one thing. How about putting food on the table?
and
Missing a
missing
meal. I mean,
meals, missing a meal.
you know, it's real prevalent in our society that we have people that are going without food, which I find very interesting because we live in a society that wastes so much food.
We do, we really do, and we try not to. We encourage the kids, finish your dinner, but it's it's one thing to tell your kids, finish your plate. There's starving kids in all over the world. Whatever. We both grow up Gen X, and that was poured into our heads. But portion size is food waste. I mean, do you really need that much food on your plate? And what's the right thing? And so if you're focusing your portions, and then if you're buying those foods and you're at this poverty level, what are you buying? Are you buying the healthy foods that tend to cost a little bit more, or are you buying the hyper enriched and purified
GMO,
foods?
the
Yeah,
high sodium, the processed foods. I was even going to the point where when we waste food, where we got a lot of restaurants here in the United States.
yeah,
A lot of them are pre-preparing food to serve that day because obviously, sometimes some of the stuff takes hours
yeah.
to
You want to be
make.
quick.
And how do you then, at the end of the night, of some of this food you're not going to be able to serve the next day uh, to make a profit or whatever, and for the quality that they want that this food costs? Where does all that food go? We're just throwing it in the trash.
Yeah,
You know,
because it costs them more. And, as just as a restaurant, they're looking at operating expenses. It would cost them more to have somebody in that line throw it all in a serving tray and throw it into the fridge so that the next day they can take it down to the local food pantry, and that food would get recycled back into the food stream, and maybe feed some of these people who are below this survival level, and are relying on those food pantries. And at the same time, the food pantries are structured to such a way that because of protections, they often can't accept those foods that are prepared off-site because they don't know what the quality level is. They don't know what the integrity of that food really is. So they'd rather have the raw materials and prep it on site than get a donation of pre-prepared foods. So the whole system is set up to fail, and not support those that need it the most.
so now, we talked about survival here. What was the next topic that comes after survival?
Next,
Comfort.
comfort level is how you choose to spend your time. You're not trading every hour for money. You can travel, you can save, you can invest and help others. And this is your freedom. This is not having to worry about, am I going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month? It's 10 to 25 times your annual expenses in savings or net worth. So enough passive income from your interest, from your dividends, from your investments, to replace that paycheck. This is financial independence is what they're
But
really talking about.
I would want to know if we had broken down this into the pie chart of America. What is the percentage of people that comfort is enough? I mean, in my opinion, I feel like this is probably um, a lower number. I'm thinking maybe 10 to 15% of
Yeah.
American society is in that comfort enough category, because that's just saying to me that when you talk about 10 to 25 times your annual expenses, if the average person, and I'm just making a number up, has got $4,000 worth of expenses. Well, let's go 5,000 just for the math. Five might be a little bit high, but we're just doing it for the math, and that's $60,000 a year. 10 times that is $600,000.
In
I don't
bank.
really feel like a lot of people have a net worth of $600,000 in our country.
Yeah, I mean, and this is real value. This is real money invested that, and we're not talking about your typical house. Okay, so people talk about net worth. Oh, hey, I've got $500,000-$600,000 house. That's not your net worth, because
That's your net worth.
how much do you own of that house versus how much of it does somebody else own? So,
Right.
if you're in a $500,000 house, which is basically scraping the market, and anything, we're on the East Coast. Anything here on the East Coast, you're barely getting in at $500K.
For something decent.
Until you're 15 plus years in, you don't own that house. You're not paying principal. You're paying interest.
How much? Oh, but there's still equity if you decide to sell that property, and how much equity was built into that house. Now,
There is.
again, normally when you're buying a house, you have no equity because you bought it typically at the top of the market at that particular time.
Yeah.
So you're going in with no equity unless whatever equity you bought in as a down payment, if you had to pay the 15-20% to get into the house. That's the equity you put into the house yourself. But
Right.
if you're getting in at 2 to 3%, you have no equity. So yeah, it's more of a bill than it is, and it's still an asset on the asset column, but you don't have any money that you could pull from that house at that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really look at the numbers that it was giving us before, if you say that having 150 to 200,000 a year for a family of four for survival, if you kind of translate that $200,000 a year annual income to this 25 times your annual expenses, I know that 200K, it was what it was saying, is covering the bills. Right?
That's pre-tax money, probably.
And that's covering the bills. That's your annual expenses, right? So if you take 25 times that, what is that? $5 million that you've got tucked away in order to be comfortable, financial independence. How much of the population is really there? And you can probably see I've already typed that question into.
Let's see what she has to say.
But let's see what the next one up is. Purpose enough is beyond comfort and becomes psychological and moral. Research shows that once people meet their needs and have modest freedom, money doesn't increase happiness much. At this point, what matters is meaningful work, relationships, control over time, impact, and legacy. So for many, enough is when you stop needing to feel more secure and when you decide your goals and not your fears. Okay, so let's get a little more existential and saying that, money isn't what drives what we do. That money is just what kind of keeps the ball rolling. But I'm living off of the interest of what I have in the account, and I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm really okay.
Yeah.
And
well, really, to me, it's a function of how you decide to live as well.
Yeah.
If you downsize into, hey, look, I have a family of five, but we could live in a 2-bedroom, apartment or something, and it would be tight, it would be uncomfortable, but it would save me a whole lot of money per month compared to what I pay in mortgage.
Yeah.
So
but
it's about how comfortable do you want to be? And
who decides that comfort?
Well, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast.
I mean, that's like your comfort levels dependent on how comfortable you feel with your own worth versus keeping up with the Joneses. My last name's not Jones. Your last name's not Jones. And are we keeping up with the Joneses? Or are you making concessions and having your family live in a smaller apartment in order to not spend as much, but how much societal pressure is being added to your family, your wife at work, your kids at school, if they're saying, well, you don't live in a nice big house, you don't live in this community, you don't live in this neighborhood, and you don't go to this school, so you're not as well off as some of these other people, even though financially on the books you could probably be a lot better off than some of these other people, but society doesn't weigh you the same if you don't fit that mold.
You know what I learned in high school? I went to a pretty upscale high school. And the one thing I learned is rich people do not flaunt their wealth. It's poor people who feel that they need to flaunt their wealth. The rich people were driving, Volvos that were 10 years old. They didn't. They had some nice clothes, but it was mostly quality stuff. But it wasn't like, oh, this is what you're seeing on television right now. It wasn't that. And it's funny to me because, when I look at the value that people who do not necessarily have a lot of money, where I want to get the designer pocketbook that costs $3,000. It's a pocketbook.
Yeah.
Or you're paying for the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton, whatever. All you're doing is paying for their name, because we saw when this whole tariff thing started up, that when a lot of these Chinese manufacturers said, oh, well, you want your Louis bag? Well, here, Louis makes their stuff here in this factory, and it really only costs, it doesn't cost, $3,000. It really costs $40,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is added value. And that product, how much added value does that actually provide to your life? So, I mean, you look at, the old adage is, a young guy gets out of high school and joins the military, right? And they get that first paycheck. And even though their first sergeant's telling them, don't go spend that money, put it in the bank, we have financial advisors that'll tell you how to save your money. What every single one of those kids always do? They go out and they buy a flashy car and a motorcycle. Yep, because they want to look like the biggest and baddest on the street. And so your adage is very appropriate in that we really don't want to conserve. We want to show off what we have now because we haven't had it in the past. So let's go.
I never had, so I want what you have. But at the same time, again, this goes back to, let me pause. It goes back to the fact that we don't teach financial literacy in schools.
Yeah.
We don't.
Most schools.
And I don't. But at the same time, America is a place of consumerism. Mm-hmm. We have to continually buy. That's why we have an Amazon. That's why we're Walmart.com, or all these other places, because we are constantly buying things that we don't necessarily need. I need it for that moment. But
as a nation, we are financially illiterate in that we think it's okay, and we're kind of stepping into some other subjects, but we think it's okay to keep spending. It's okay to drive ourselves into debt. And so that starts going back into some of these different comfort levels, because debt will erode those comfort levels quicker than you can bat an eye.
Yes, they will, because they want their money.
So you asked the question, if you want to see how it breaks out across the population of America, and you want to kind of see it in a pie chart. So let's go ahead and ask and see how these three levels break out. And I'm really thinking that we're going to start seeing that 1%. You hear that adage of the 1%ers, that are the comfortable people. And okay, so they're saying that there's about 10%.
These numbers are not what I would thought they would be.
No, and
go down a little bit. I want to see what the breakdown says.
Yeah. 55% in the survival range, 35% in the comfort range, about 10% in the purpose range. It asks to do.
I think the numbers are higher than 55%. But again, we are taking our East Coast model and sticking it on the whole United States. Whereas if I'm living, in Montana or somewhere where it's a little bit more rural, the cost of living is significantly less than what it is where we live.
Yeah, the most expensive parts of the country are within 50 miles of the ocean, and anywhere around,
Yes.
So, would you like me to overlay annual average income ranges or net worth levels for each group to make this more concrete? Yeah, let's say yeah. Let's do that. I think it's interesting that we hear about the 1%, but this is saying 10. I wonder how much of a difference there is between the 1% and the 10%. So so your red area, your 55% survival, is net worth of about less than 100K. Your blue is your 35%, and those are your 100K to a million in net worth. And then your 10% is your 1 million plus net worth. Saying in the U.S. that there's 10% of the population that has $1 million in net worth, and that's really telling. It's saying that only 10% are comfortable. Let's take a pivot here. And what if we asked about too much money?
Okay.
And
well, let's see what it says.
and
I
maybe
don't think it's going to give us what we think.
Yeah, maybe we can drive it from both ends.
Because I don't think they're going to say, "Oh, you have too much money." I don't know anybody who's ever said that. You know what, Mike? I have too much money. I've never heard anybody say that. What is too much money?
All right, so economically is when wealth stops serving you and starts serving itself. Danny Kahneman in 2010, a famous economist, says happiness plateaus at about 100K to 150K a year. So hold on, before we go any further, we're talking your happiness plateaus at survival level. Yeah,
well, granted, think about it like this. If you are a person and all your bills are paid and you are comfortable, then everything above and beyond that, to me, would be you're now in comfort. You're in that point where I can travel, I can do this, I can do that, because all my bills are met. My basic needs have been met. So I can understand the logic behind that. But continue. I'm sorry.
So it's like it says, diminishing returns. So you're talking about just incremental increases in happiness based on, maybe exponential increases in value. So
wait. You're a thinker, and I want to pull that thread a little bit.
Okay.
Because
pull away.
I'm going to talk about Elon Musk.
Oh boy. Loaded.
He was a person who had, at the beginning of his journey, had fantastic ideas. He was trying to help the world. He wanted to do some things to help the world. And I don't know what happened between that time and then when we go to recent time where it seemed like he turned into some maniacal, like James Bond villain or something, because I'm like, when you have the type of money he has, and right now, I guess Tesla or whatever, I saw some deal or something that they're working on to
pay him $1 trillion.
$1 trillion deal.
$1 trillion.
Right? If you had $1 trillion, you could literally, if you want to go and impact history, have your name, read about through time as someone who impacted the earth, he could take that money, go to Africa, where he's from, and there's a lot of undeveloped countries in there that really need some help, and he could do things like, hey, I'm going to start a solar farm here to provide you guys free electricity, and then we're going to build a town around this, and then we're going to use this as a testing bed for solar panels, and you guys will also produce the panels. So as the technology gains and you can then keep exchanging your solar panels, but you're selling them, and then let me take that model and shift it to another town, and maybe they focus on something else that needs to be technologically advanced, and do something and bring all those ships up with the tide. I mean, there's so many things that could be done that you can say, like, and then when 100 years from now, when I'm reading the history books, well, Elon Musk went to Africa, did this, this, and this, and he changed the course of history for this country, or whatever. That is impact.
Yeah, and granted, there are, every single one of these philanthropists has a jaded side to it, but like Bill and Melinda Gates did some great things with their wealth, with the Microsoft wealth that was built, and their foundations went out and they were setting up malaria hospitals in Africa. They were digging wells where there wasn't water, providing just the amount of give back to the community was substantial. But at what point do you lose touch with reality and not really understand what you're doing or why you're doing it? Because you're so far taken back from your contact with the people who are at the survival level or below that you really don't understand what your money means and what it does. So I think that really hits into the ethics and your empathy. You really can't feel empathy for somebody that you're financially separated from that far. That's like really asking somebody to understand you as a person when they're just they don't even understand what your species is.
I mean, and that's valid because it's like, well, and then the other problem with that is that, okay, I'm going to help out this individual, and now I've got a long line of other people with their hand out looking for the next, hey, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me?
Yep, that's where we get to this next point of too much is when security turns into isolation. It's the whole old Howard Hughes effect, he locked himself into his hotel in Las Vegas because he was afraid of germs, and yeah, he was doing some great things. He was funding the war effort. He was dumping money into the DoD to really help the growth of national defense, and had some great ideas. A really smart guy, and then got afraid of his own shadow to the point where people didn't see him for the last few years of his life, and there are all the theories that he wasn't there. He's not alive. No relationship to people. It just in his own head. I think it really. I wonder if the folks like Elon Musk really start to feel that security isolation type of perspective, or is it a matter of some of them? Well, I mean, Elon's got his own quirk, so I'm not sure he really views any of those concerns. I think some of his own personality quirks just feed right past that. Well, I mean, you got other famous celebrities that you don't see, and you're just like, oh, watch out for the paparazzi. Well, you got to hide from them.
I think that they all have a sense of, when you start having your own personal security, it gets to a point where, well, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Well, somebody might kidnap me, somebody might, do whatever, attack me, blah, blah, blah. So it does get to a point where I need personal security for my welfare. But, the funny thing is, there are millionaires walking around us when we go to Walmart, and it's only about when you hit that public eye when people know how much money you actually have.
So too much is when your private wealth exceeds the public good. When you're buying political influence. That never happens. That never happened.
That doesn't happen.
When you can't go to the grocery store because you're afraid people are going to see you and want to stop and talk to you, and you're just afraid of that social contact, or you're unwilling to reinvest that money that you have into the world around you to make sure the world around you doesn't absolutely fall apart, because your money. Pablo Escobar had more money than anybody else. He had more money than he could spend, and he was losing $1 million a month, I think, at his peak to natural decay, mold, and mice. Okay, $1 million a month.
Well, it kept burying his money too, and everybody keeps trying to find it because it's buried somewhere.
So you talk about how losing that amount of money, where his was ill-gotten gains and drugs and everything else, but what if he had been investing that money back into the political environment and the social environment of the world he lived in? What if Elon was dropping the money that he has directly back? What if he said, I only need X amount from me and my significant other and my kids to live? I've established a trust for each of my kids. They have money that they need, so that they're not going to have to worry. They have a financial independence and somebody who's going to watch over them. Okay, that's good. My family's taken care of. My parents, my brother, sister, whatever. However far out you want to reach. And the rest of what I have is going to be reinvested. Any income off of that is going to be reinvested back into the public good. And I'm not going to, I don't want any more of it. And when do we lose contact with having too much money that you say, oh, I've got to have it all, versus I need everybody else to have what I have. And I think that's really where that societal breakdown really starts to happen, is everybody wants what you have.
When you look at some rich people from long ago, who set up some sort of trusts and for college educations and libraries, like the Pratt Library system in Baltimore is based off of this guy, and he funded it all, and and I'm still thinking of working off that money. It's one of those things where a lot of times these investments don't happen until after the person's dead. But in today's society, when they're alive, how many private jets do you need to own? You can only be at one at a time. Like we just said earlier, how many houses can you possibly own? You can only be at one at a time. How many cars do you need to own? You can only drive or be in one at a time.
Yeah.
And it's about sometimes I feel like it's the accumulation of things. We need to have more things. I need this. I need that. Why? Half the crap that people buy, that are not like a refrigerator, dishwasher, maybe even a television. I would assume that a lot of the stuff is just not used. We have it to meet some society norm or whatever, but how many of us have a dining room set that gets used at Thanksgiving and Christmas, or a living room set that nobody ever gets to sit on?
No.
Some random furniture we don't need. Those are small things, but we conspicuously consume a lot of our money on things, and then we cry poor when no, you have your wealth, but you're wearing it. You have your wealth, you're sitting on it. You have your wealth, but it's not in the form of the money that you can actually use today because you spent the actual money on something else that you didn't need.
We're too busy worrying about showing the people that we have the wealth, which is that civilizational imbalance that it kind of alludes to. Is it's more important that we show that we have the money than we do a societal beneficial good with it, and try to use that money to rise the tide that floats all the boats.
But now you're talking socialism. God forbid you say socialism in the United States, but it's funny because half the stuff we do is socialism. And that's what I always laugh at. But we're not going to be this socialist country. I'm like, we already are.
And is our business economy set up such that spending that money to help everybody else out is going to hurt you more than keeping that money to yourself? So I think that's kind of where it is the tax incentives and the other structures are set up so that you're going to be penalized if you spend that money and spread it around, versus keep it to yourself and build your own independent and individual wealth. You can bring your kids with you as long as they're under your household. As long as they live under your roof and they're under 21, they can benefit from that wealth. But God forbid you want to send some of that out the door and pay for a whole line of food banks in your in your city that could feed thousands of people daily, and they wouldn't have to worry about food independence or where's my next meal coming from.
That's when you take away some of the survival type requirements, that we had talked about earlier, when you take some of that stuff away, and this person doesn't have to worry about where their food's coming from the next day, then I need you to focus on school. I need the school I mean, this is a money thing. Can you imagine if all schools and school teachers, were kind of like how the government is on a GS scale that, with maybe regional, bump up depending upon where you live, but
Pay differentials. Yep.
all teachers across the United States were paid the same.
Yeah.
And all schools were given the same resources. The playing field would be too level because I feel like part of the whole money thing is, and I want to say something kind of controversial, is that we are set up, in my mind, kind of keeping things kind of like a caste system. You have to keep certain people at a certain level because, hey, I need my blue collar worker to go out there and work at the supermarket or do the gas station or whatever. And if I hinder them from being at my level, I can keep that workforce where I need it to be.
Yeah. And you can pay for a better education.
But then again, it goes back to what you're saying, the debt.
Yeah.
College education right now is typically $50,000 a year. It's $200,000. These kids are going to graduate with $200,000 in debt, and they're at the beginning of their starting line.
And that's I wasn't even talking about college. I'm talking about primary school and secondary school. You can pay for that, and you're talking $10,000 to $20,000 a year per kid. If you want a quote-unquote better education where they're going to get that elite level of education that puts them in a different social tier, how is that benefiting society? If you want to pull on that string a little bit further, how does that benefit versus hurt society and not keep that level playing field? I think,
has there ever been a level playing field in the United States? I mean, again, we're circling us all back into how much money is enough money. Is there or has there ever been a level playing field in our country? Because if you said yes, then you're really talking about socialism. Because I feel like socialism tries to make a level playing ground for everybody.
Yeah, and the rest of the world is going to compete with you to try and ensure that society and that structure doesn't work.
I mean, do we compare ourselves to China? Because they're a socialist country.
Yeah.
And, a lot more people than we have. But when I look at China, they seriously have the haves and the have-nots. Once you get past, some of the larger cities like Hong Kong and stuff like that, it's the have and have-nots.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And there might be socialist tendencies and socialist structures in place within a capitalist economy because China of 1970, 1980 is drastically different than China of today. So you didn't have those societal wealth and individual wealth components 40, 50 years ago where you have them today.
But going back, so what is enough money? I know for myself, if you're always going to have bills.
Yep.
I don't care who you are, you're going to have, your electric bill, phone bill, internet bill, because we all need the internet at this point. Somewhere to, even if you have if you don't have a mortgage, you still got to pay taxes, you still got to pay insurance.
Yeah.
What is enough?
Enough money to me right now. This being our first episode, Mike, means keeping this podcast going. And you can do that by supporting us through our Patreon at Mindfall Podcast. Just search us up and you can join our Patreon levels and you can support us so that we can keep going, that we can keep doing this and diving deep on these hard questions. So, Mike, how do you feel about our first podcast?
Yeah, I feel like we could have a second podcast on the same topic. And there's just so much meat left on that bone, because the wealth in our country is vast, but then the poverty is just as vast.
Yep.
We just heard recently with the whole SNAP benefits, they were having cancellations and not getting paid out. And I was looking at some of the news, never realized the impacts of, it said it impacted 40 million people. I'm just like, oh my God, I never realized 40 million people in our country need SNAP benefits. And that's just getting food to survive.
Yeah, that's that food insecurity. 330 million people, 40 million of that is is that red part of that graph. The people who are at or below that survival level. Yeah, we could go on for another hour. I think we've hit a good cap on this one. But if you have any ideas that you want to give to us for us to dig into in future podcasts, you can shoot them over to us either through our Patreon or hit us up at mindfall.podcast@gmail.com, and we'll try to get to all those questions. And Mike, I hope to see you at our next episode. We're going to see what we can do, and we're going to try to keep this going. All right?
Thank you. All right,
Thanks,
so
Mike.
our next conversation.
Yes, sir. We'll see you soon, right here on Mindfall.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to Mindfall, where the questions twist and turn. Dive deep with us, we'll watch ideas burn. Down the rabbit hole we go, chasing thoughts you've yet to know.